Yes, it's Dr. Sarah Larsen in the house, and I'm so excited that you're here. We are talking about lessons 8 to lessons 14 in A Course in Miracles. I am with the awesome and amazing Greg Roach. I'm also with the awesome, cool, one of my favorite people in the world, so cool that I married him, Greg Larson. We refer to the man that I married as baby, and Greg Roach. So glad you guys are here. Please say hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So looking forward to today's chat with these beautiful souls.
Greg.
Ditto. So grateful.
Yay, awesome. Let's dive right into the lessons. We love feedback, and I got so much feedback on the first lessons. And part of that feedback was get to the juicy stuff really early. So we are doing these for you. The reason that I'm doing this is because the Course has meant so much to me, and it has opened up so many belief systems in order for me to let them go. I want everyone out there, I want you who's watching to be free from thoughts and beliefs and from the ego and from fear. It's such a beautiful thing. And Greg Roach, what do you want everyone to get? Why are you doing this today?
I want exactly what you want. I want us all to be released from the bonds of the ego, from the bonds of fear, and I want us to be able to, walk into a glorious new way of being on the planet.
Awesome. Baby Larson.
Well, as we'll learn in today's lessons, it's to see God without what thoughts create. Thoughts create all this external meaning and all this suffering through this meaning. That if we can be released from that or freed from that, then we can know God. So that's my intention for today.
That is so beautiful. I'm going to start with reading lesson number 8. And it's lesson number 8 is my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. And so, my darling, you started us off so beautifully. Tell me what this means to you and what's come in for you around lesson 8.
Well, you know what? I had a very powerful experience several years ago when I was married the first time, went through divorce. I was completely consumed by past thoughts. And I was suffering tremendously from thinking about this relationship that was ending, which we eventually got divorced. And because I was suffering so tremendously, I sought, I just had to find a way out of that pain and suffering. I came across Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and if you happen to read that book, which is very popular and has touched many people's lives, Eckhart Tolle references A Course in Miracles many times in that book, because it's the same journey, it's the same story. It's seeing how all this meaning we attach to life events is false and it's meaningless, and it's, we just create so much attachment to it that it creates just terrible suffering. And so, and again, right there, and even though we might not think we're thinking about the past, if you really paid attention, you would find out that the majority of your thoughts are somewhere other than the present moment, in the past for sure, and also in future thoughts that are anxious or tense. So it's such a true statement that we carry so much of the past with us.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And what comes in for me as you were sharing that is the purpose of this exercise is to train your mind to recognize when it's not really thinking at all. As a doctor, working as a therapist, I know 50,000 thoughts come in every single day. And the frequency of those that are from the past, automatic negative thoughts are generated, and so I call them ants. There's so many ants in our mind, these little marchers that come in. And so, Greg Roach, I'd love for you to share what this lesson number 8, the mind is preoccupied with past thoughts, meant to you.
Well, case in point, I had a hard time really focusing on what baby was saying apt and brilliant and perceptive though it was, because I was thinking, what did I think the first time I read this lesson? Right? So, you know, I mean, it was just brought home so clearly, you know, when I kind of snapped back to reality and went, oh, yeah, okay, I've been living in the past from the first time that I, you know, encountered this little bit of confrontation. So, you know, I guess it's just a reminder that we don't really know the world as it is. And we don't even really know ourselves as we are. You know, everything's a projection out. And what we see, what we perceive of, what we believe to be the truth is really that projection. And, you know, the analogy that just came to mind is, you've probably heard this, when you meditate, you know, it's as if you go down into the depths of the water, and the thoughts that come to you are the waves on the surface. They're there, but they're not your mind, and they're certainly not the self. And the analogy just was sort of, you know, furthered for me, because I could see, you know, dropping down into the depths of water, seeing the waves, but understanding that actually the wave that's right in my field of vision started somewhere else. It's, you know, that's an emanation from the past even that I'm looking at and mistaking for something resembling a clear and true present. So.
That is so beautiful, and it's such a great point, that whatever we're looking at, it started somewhere before now, even before it reaches the receptors, our eyes being the receptors of information, our mind then processing that information. It's so beautiful to have that. And when I was reading this, the thought that I had the first time, I really, really felt my thoughts, and I was of the school, I think, therefore I am, for a very long time, learning Eckhart Tolle's work, learning the Course in Miracles. I really searched for what is the opposite then. And what I found, if we're not in the past, if our thoughts, my mind is preoccupied with the past, past thoughts. The opposite of that is an experience of the non-dualistic world of knowledge. So the opposite of being stuck in the past, or the opposite of being stuck in this, is feeling God and His creations in the perfect unity of His will and spirit. And so if we have the world's perception of things, if we have the past perception of things, then we're really in a dualistic world. And if we are really giving ourselves, wow, by reflecting that I have these automatic negative thoughts, and letting myself be free of those, I'm stepping into a world of knowledge. And this world of knowledge is of God, of love, of perfect unity. It's will and spirit, and it's a holy relationship with the world, rather than something that I am creating from the light that's coming in through my eyes, that's being perceived by the back of my mind, and then turning it into colors and this dualistic world. And so I would love to hear either one of your thoughts on just that for a minute, or to the opposite of when you're not in a space of being preoccupied with the past, what becomes available? What are you experiencing?
Maybe you want to take that one?
Well, just like right there, there's immense joy to discover and to, you know, cherish. There's immense love. Like the universe, there's so much love, energy in the universe, and yet we cut ourselves off from that by being trapped in these automatic negative thoughts. And so there's so much creative ideas. There's so much intuitive guidance. There's a wealth of everything we're looking for truly in life, and yet we cut ourselves off from that by by, you know, allowing these automatic negative thoughts to consume us. And so there's just a wealth of goodness, of greatness, of joy. And the more I enter into that and experience that, I'm just feel so blessed and so grateful and so thankful and appreciative, because it's so much of my experience now that I just would, you know, and I want that for everyone. That's why we're doing this today. So
Beautiful. Thank you. And Greg, if you'll chime in, Greg Roach.
Well, you know, there is indeed a whole lot of energy that gets wrapped up in percolating on the past, or you know, fretting on the past. And you know, when we're able to release that and exist in a clear and true present, yeah, life becomes a miracle. The world becomes a miracle. Existence becomes a miracle. But you have to be freed from the story of the past to be able to live in that place of all possibilities that is, you know, in the now.
Beautiful. That's so lovely, tying all of this together so that we can move on to letting go of the automatic negative thoughts. They're generated in our mind. They let us have this experience of really being in pain rather than being in possibility. And so that brings me to lesson number 9, which is I see nothing as it is now. I see nothing as it is now. And so, baby, I'd love for you to chime in on what this means to you, what this idea, obviously following from the 2 preceding ones as it's written here.
you know, I love this. They're so the author of this and the you know, as they captured it, it's such a brilliant teaching, because it understands immediately how attached the mind is to its perceived reality. And so it just keeps hitting home this idea that, you know, none of this is real. None of this, you know, nothing you see right now is what you think it is. Because you just resist, there's just a resistance to that immediately, because you think that doesn't make any sense. Of course what I'm looking at is real, but we're so, it's like, you know, it's this metaphor of the fish being in water. You just don't notice that you're surrounded by water. We don't notice that we live in a world just permeated by what we give it meaning to, and what everyone else is giving it meaning to. So hard to see what truly exists, because there's such a dense layer of thought and mind, and the news and magazines and TV shows, everyone's telling us what to think, what to believe, you know, how we're flawed, what, you know, where we're going wrong, all these things like that. We just live in a sea of thought in the past that it's almost impossible to truly perceive the now. So the Course just keeps hitting home this idea that, just, you know, hitting us just like you have to let go of this idea that you can create anything of truth with thought. And so that's what they're doing here, and I love it.
Awesome. Greg Roach, I can't wait to hear what you're going to chime in with this too.
Well, you know, again, this is part of that inexplicable portion of the Course, where your mind is really kind of confounded by a lot of these things, because it is such a confrontation of our, you know, indoctrinated perception, or our indoctrinated ideas about normalcy, about truth, about reality. You know, the analogy that just came to me is that if a minute before we started this, my best friend called me a name, told me I was stupid or whatever, and it had hurt my feelings, those hurt feelings, those negative emotions would still probably be very active in me. If I go back and remember a time when I was 3 or 4 years old on the playground, and my best friend told me that I was stupid, you know, obviously that the emotional impact of that by now has faded considerably. But so that, you know, that's sort of an extreme analogy for what we're confronted with, the choice that we're confronted with all the time. You know, how far back into the past do you want to go to be able to hold on to some hurt, for instance? And it doesn't matter. It could be something that was painful. It could also be something that was pleasurable. But if it takes you out of your connection, an authentic connection with the present, it's equally destructive to your walking in the truth of life. And you know, so for me, this lesson is really about strip away everything. You know, how far back do you want to go? You want to go back to this morning when something good or bad happened, or do you want to go back, you know, 30 years? And if you're a 30-year-old person, how are you going to feel about the things that happened to you when you're 30, when you're 70? You know, all of it is sort of just peeling the onion until you get down to the fact that, you know, as Tolle says, there's only now. And we have to disabuse ourselves of the illusion that there's anything else going on, which is tough. It's so hard, you know?
Yes.
It truly is. And I love that you brought up being on the playground at 3 or 4. You know, most of our operation manual in our brain got formulated before the age of 5. That means we made all of our belief systems, all of the ways that we relate to the world exist in our mind. We created it before age 5. And much of that creation happened in our mind and in our hearts before we reached the age of reason, which is somewhere between 7 and 9 for most of us. So most of us have a way of being that was generated on the playground by maybe our best friend at 3 or 4 calling us stupid, and we then go through the rest of our lives with these eyes perceiving the world in sort of that limited way that we see ourselves or the way that we perceive the world. That 3 or 4-year-old having that ingrained in their mind, subconscious, psychology development talks about this, and the age of reason doesn't even come in till it's 7 to 9. And so this lesson especially talks about training us to have fresh eyes to see with in order to make those decisions again. That the baby Greg Roach at 3 or 4 walking around maybe having his friend say that to him is then going out and relating to every story in his mind as trying to show he's not stupid or trying to show his intelligence, and so is receiving all the data, and maybe something or some person, some feeling is triggered, and then your mind has to create the story to fit the trigger feeling. And so this lesson, I see nothing as it is now, really teaches us to go back and use the age of reason, which we have now, to evaluate possible sources, possible hurts, possible things coming in, and not automatically assign a feeling, a meaning, a judgment of them, really. And so that's why I love this one in particular. I see nothing as it is now, because there's something that's running a program in there. For most of us, that program has not been examined to allow for the age of reason. And so that's why this is so powerful. And I want to move on to lesson number 10, which really highlights this as well, which is my thoughts do not mean anything. And so, Greg Roach, as we're sharing, I want to get your thoughts on my thoughts, this lesson number 10. My thoughts do not mean anything.
Yeah, that one also really pissed me off the first time I encountered it. What the hell do you mean my thoughts don't mean anything? My thoughts are the most important thing in the world. And of course, that's exactly what this lesson is guiding us towards, is the realization that we believe that our thoughts are real. We feel that our thoughts are real. We feel that our thoughts are the world. And in fact, they're the exact opposite of the world. They're the exact opposite of reality. They're the exact opposite of truth. You know, they are phantasms that indeed are the product of who knows what, you know, myriad number of different factors that you know, cause them to come into seeming existence. But as a result, we're kept at a divide. We're kept at a distance from the world, from really truly knowing the world, and in particular, really truly knowing any other human being. And and especially if you start to think about, you get two people in a room, and my thoughts are creating what I think of as the world, and your thoughts are creating what you think of as the world. It's really kind of remarkable that we can communicate across that divide, at all. But again, all of these come back to the necessity of dismantling the facade, our identification with the false construct of the ego self, and the process of mentation as being something that is real.
Awesome. That is so great. And Greg, I'd love your thoughts, baby Larsen. My thoughts do not mean anything. I'd love for you to chime in and also share how Greg's words are affecting you as well.
Well, he started off with, exactly how most human beings feel. Like, my thoughts mean so much. My opinions about politics, my opinions about my sports teams, my opinions about, whether, the terrorists are doing the right thing or the wrong. I mean, we get so invested in our opinions that they become so real that if someone doesn't like what we think, we throw a punch. We get so mad. We get, actually not, I mean, that's just the short of it. People fire guns. People, send off rockets. I mean, it leads to just the worst in people because they're so invested in a reality based on thought, which is, it's such a limited perspective. As Greg was talking, it's like, I remember going back to listening to other teachers. We're, on this planet, we're just a little smidgen off the planet, and yet there's this planet that's rotating around a sun, that's in a solar system, that's in a galaxy. There's all these different levels of movement and complexity, and we're just, and our perception is so limited because we're a human being on Earth, approximately 6 feet off the ground. That it's such a, just physically, it's such a limiting perspective that to give any weight to what our opinion is or to what we think the world is just such a, it can almost be considered ridiculous when you step back a little bit. And even as ridiculous as it is, we're so invested in it that we would fight another person to death to defend that belief.
And that's such a beautiful, beautiful way to really show how much meaning there is already in the world, how much invested there is in the world that's already been created. And I love in the book, it says, the exercises consist as before as searching your mind for all the thoughts that are available to you now without selection or judgment. And I really wanted to emphasize the word now. I added that word, but it really is, when you are, my thoughts do not mean anything, it then breaks you open to have that, and I like to call it the feeling of the holy instant. The holy instant defined in the Course in Miracles, and it's the instant that's outside time in which we choose forgiveness instead of guilt. The miracle inside of a grievance, the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. So if we detach a meaning to the thought and we take a deep breath in and we start looking for other ideas that it means, it brings us, and we keep searching for, there is no meaning to this, there is no meaning to this. We step into and choose forgiveness instead of guilt. Forgiveness, and the miracle comes in that there's no longer fearing the future. There's no longer holding on to the past. There's no longer the mental hell that we create for ourselves. And one of the hardest things, I think, is when we care for someone and something happens where they have done something hurtful, it seems, to us. That's the hardest time I find, because I'm a relationship person and I love just everything being in flow. When that happens, it's really hard for me not to judge myself, and not to judge and say, God, search my mind for all the things that I might have done wrong or said wrong, and to really hold myself in a state of guiltlessness, because my tendency is to wash over with guilt. When I wash over with guilt, then I go into a little bit of hiding and not in this space of being with everyone. I tend to not smile or laugh, or I go into my own personal hell based on a meaning that I'm giving a moment. And so that's what's really available in this lesson for me, was that holy instant. It's it's like outside of time itself, and it's about choosing a guiltless state for myself and guiltless for everyone around, as I keep searching for letting go, letting go. Nothing means anything. Nothing means anything. So thank you. And this lesson really is, this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. And I think that's one of the keys, is releasing yourself from all that you believe. That was lesson number 10, and we're stepping into lesson number 11. Lesson number 11 is, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. And baby Larsen, I would love for you to talk about lesson number 11.
Well, you know what? I think it just goes right back to something that's in the current news. You know, there was the terrorist attack in France, and you know, people were killed because, you know, a group in France was writing cartoons or that were slanderous towards the Prophet Muhammad, and then the people who were, you know, defending the Prophet Muhammad, you know, which led to violence and people were killed. And it's just like, you know, if you could repeat that again, my meaningless thoughts are leading to a meaningless world. Is that what that was?
Sure. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world.
That's right. And so, you know, unfortunately, even though all of these things should be meaningless, they should just be reflections of life. They don't, but because they're just so impactfully, each group trying to force just as powerfully as they can meaning using their ways of communicating, you know, that it's becomes so real to them that it leads to this violence and to this suffering and to this amplification of fear. Whereas if we were to be able to rest in this knowing that, oh, someone wrote this cartoon, you know, offending this person, you know, it's all just meaningless thoughts reflecting a meaningless world. So I'm not going to be upset by that or, you know, feel offended by that. I'm just going to allow that to be an experience in the world and tune into, again, what is true and real, which is love. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Instead of taking these meaningless words in this meaningless world, you know, in a love, from a love place of love, they take it from a place of being offended and wanting to offend. You know, the one group wants to offend with their message, and the other group is totally offended by that message, which leads to this just really senseless violence. And so I had to bring that up because it's in the news right now, and it's being played over and over and over and amplified over and over and over. Really just these meaningless expressions in a meaningless world. That's all it is, but it's not that because we're so attached to this other reality.
I want to chime in with this one as well. When you're bringing in this, it's very emotional to me. It really, really hurts at some level in watching this and witnessing this, because I feel a strong call to message. And as I'm writing this this message out, my reflection on these instances is really two groups that have taken on what I think the Course would call idols. The idol, as defined by the Course in Miracles, is a symbol of the substitution of the ego for our true self. So each of these is the journalists, the ones that are really at an extreme end, trying to make meaningless in a meaningless world. Their work is just it invokes emotion, and I think it's at that extreme at one level because it is meaningless. As I think part of their work is trying to show extreme meanings to something that's really meaningless, and yet they have for themselves taken on a substitution of their own ego for their true selves. Yes. And this other group, but again, taking religion or taking a belief and substituting that, a false belief that there can be something other than or more than God, that and going into this world, creating such duality. And so I think our sharing of this message, really anything that you would fight for, anything that you're hurt by, anything that is, and that brought that out in me, that symbol of the substitution of the ego for our true self or God, that energy coming up, anything that you comes up, you are idolizing that. And so for this lesson for me, with what's occurring in the news, really brought up emotion around, you know, I idealize at some level our human race and our ability, our oneness, and my desire to have heaven on earth, for us to walk sort of through the Course in Miracles, or whatever course or program that we're in that leads us to unity. I found this sense of urgency this week around that, and I'm so grateful this lesson came when it did, so that I could see where I was even idealizing that unity, and using that as a way to hurt myself, this false belief that there can be something other than or more than God that separates us from Him. Everything is all right at some level. All of the things in the formed world are here to connect us deeper to the unity of God. And this nightmare, as the Course talks about, that we're in, when my peace got disrupted, I stepped into the nightmare rather than into the unity when I got hurt. And so when I brought peace back into myself, I was back in unity for those moments, back in the holy instant, back into heaven and out of duality. And so, Greg Roach, this is getting so juicy, and you travel so extensively throughout the world, Spirit Quest tours, all of the, you were just in you were just in Bali, you were just in Canada, you were just in Italy, and so I'd love to hear your take on what's in the news in this lesson.
Well, you know, I think that this lesson is, as you said, so apt in relation to a lot of things that the world is seeing right now. And the things that we're seeing in the world are a clear indication of how much humanity needs this. You know, yes. If we could get to that point of transcendence, of moving beyond the idolization of these ideas that we mistake for reality, and that is such a beautiful way to characterize it. You know, that substitution of the ego self, or the rightness of the ego, our certainty in the rightness of the ego, and we substitute for the truth of God, for the truth of unity. And as a result, you know, we use that no matter who we are. use that as a rationale to inflict harm or violence or disrespect, whatever the case may be, on any other human. These are just such clear indicators of both the power of the Course and why we need it. And so these are reminders as to, for me, one of the reasons why I think it's so important. Not only that we do this work, but that everyone does this work. And, it's interesting because I do travel so much. And, baby, early on, I don't remember if it was in our last session or in one of the teachings that we've shared together in person, you said, you're in one of two states, ultimately. You're either in love or you're in fear. And I hear a lot of people come to me and, they'll say about my choices of travel and the places I travel to, aren't you afraid? It's like, no, I'm in love. And I never put it in those terms. I never even really thought about it in those terms, even though I believe I understood it in those terms, until you said that. And that's going to be my response from now on. Aren't you afraid? No, I'm in love. Because when you walk in that place of love, I mean, I've been in so many parts of the world. The Middle East, North Africa, the Far East, where the belief systems are quite different from those that we have here in the States. And I have never, not one time, ever felt threatened, by any situation or person or belief or circumstance. And I think that when you can see the world clearly and can see other people clearly, that you're sort of armored in love or armored by love, and I've always felt so protected. I've never really given any of this a second thought, and I'm certainly not planning on changing that anytime soon. So
that's so beautiful. So you're walking in fear or you're walking in love. And I love that I truly felt so beautifully safe traveling most of my life, and especially in places that our friends would call and say, "Are you crazy for going to Egypt?" And it was so safe while I was there. It felt so beautiful, and all places in Italy where there was a protest going on, really feeling the feelings of love, and it really created that. And it brings us to lesson number 12. I am upset because I see a meaningless world. And I think I touched on this a little bit, that upset part. And I think this is a very important key lesson. The ideas that are presented and the exercises, and when we get into what is meaningless is neither good nor bad. Why then should a meaningless world upset you? And so baby Larsen, with either being in love or in fear, taking that concept and expanding on what is meaningless is neither good or bad, or this lesson number 12, I am upset because I see a meaningless world.
Yeah, well, that just goes right to the ego. The ego has to create meaning to solidify its identity. And so when you're telling the ego that the world is meaninglessness, which is the exact opposite of the reality it wants to create, it's going to be upset. And so that just, just points directly to that, to the expanded, love-filled, conscious human being. They can look around and view the world without any meaning and just perceive its beauty, perceive its natural goodness, perceive its natural order. But the ego has to create meaning, and not only that, it has to create meaning that supports its belief, it supports its pain, supports its dysfunction, supports its tragic existence, whatever that is. And so it's just going to immediately evoke upset by the Course stating the world is meaningless, because that's the exact opposite that the ego is looking for. The ego demands meaning and significance.
That's beautiful. And Greg Roach, I'd love you to chime in.
Well, this comes back to the idea that it's all an inside job. It is upsetting if the world is meaningless. But as we've just seen in the lessons, leading up to this particular one, it's like, well, what's the source of this meaninglessness? It's my false assumptions, my false identification. It's my belief that my thoughts are real, and then projecting that out onto the raw substance of existence. And of course, what the Course is going to do eventually is steer us back around to an understanding of what the hell's really going on here. What is the source of meaning, and what is the nature of truth. But I guess we need these cliffhangers now and again. Because if in fact everything were ultimately and in its totality meaningless, we'd have a problem. But what the Course is doing is setting things up so that we can understand the true meaning behind life, the true meaning behind existence. So, and also, Sarah, I think it is important, and I'm assuming that everyone understands this, that it's not just the concepts that are embodied in like the bold heading of the lesson, but it's actually doing the work of the lesson. Whether that's 3 times a day, sitting for 5 minutes and closing your eyes and being aware of your thoughts, or scanning the room, whatever it is. So obviously we don't have time to really go into those in depth, but there is work behind the concepts.
So like this lesson, it has this 3 or 4 times is enough for practicing the idea for today. And so nor should the practice exceed a minute or 2. But what's beautiful in real time, bringing your awareness into these lessons, lesson number 12, doing it 3 or 4 times throughout the day. Sometimes I will do I will do them with my meals. Before I have a meal, set the intention, my morning, whatever I have in the morning, to take a look at that lesson, sort of process it before I eat. And so that's one of the ways that I found to make sure I get the lesson sort of like on my schedule, is to make that minute before I eat, to have the experience and to meditate. And so for me personally, it's like being a little bit hungry for the soul's food that's presented here. And this lesson, that I am upset because I see a meaningless world, for me really was the essence of looking at the ego. And it really brought in the essence of forgiveness, as the Course would define looking at the ego. It's kind of like looking with the Holy Spirit's or possibilities. When we're seeing possibilities, when we're seeing the Holy Spirit, when we're seeing Source as non-judgmental gentleness and patience at our ego's thought system. So what happened for me is I expected for me to be upset, and I forgave myself for being upset, and then I had the gentleness and the possibility of God's love present in my heart as I looked out into the world. And so that perceiving myself as possibly being upset all the time, let me forgive myself, let me get the love of God, and then it's sort of the guilt and the ego and the true nature of things, to have them without judgment, and then to get back into love. And we've been talking a lot about love, and so I'd love to define that. Love, the essence of God's being and relationship to His creation, which is unchanging and eternal. Love, the essence of God in a knowledge form, is beyond definition and teaching, and can only be experienced. or known once the barriers of guilt and barriers of shame have been removed through perception. And it's love, sort of stated in the Course in Miracles, can only be achieved in the unity of all of us getting it together. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about teaching this is once you break the illusory world of perception, true love comes in, truly knowing ourselves comes in. So thank you guys. This is so good. It's so good to practice these lessons, and I really recommend doing it before meals. And so, Greg Roach, how do you find yourself practicing, making sure you get it onto your schedule?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, it has to be something that you consciously incorporate into your day, like, you know, any other form of hygiene. Get up, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, you know, do yoga, go to the gym. You have to set the intention that it's going to be an active part, you know, of your life. It's not the kind of thing where, oh yeah, where was I in that book? Let me pick it up, and you know, like, you know, this one requires discipline, and it can be tricky sometimes. But in particular, when you get into the lessons where, you know, it's like, do this 3 times a day throughout the day, but for only a minute, you know. And so, you know, being able to remind yourself, and I love, you know, your approach to it, you know, setting aside a little additional space around mealtime. That's beautiful. I'm going to steal that from you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And Greg Larsen, how do you find time with these lessons? How are you feeling through these?
Well, I love our commitment to each other to make this part of our process, so I find time by finding time with you.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. And I'm so grateful that we found this in partnership. And I really credit the teaching for being able to take me out of the upset, egotistical thoughts, you know, who am I without my thoughts world, into the space. Greg and I have a saying, you're forgiven before you do anything, which really allows for us to really dive into the true perception of love, which is an expression of true joining with another. So you're forgiven before you do anything, and I say that to our children, I say that to our friends, I say that repeatedly. And it's a really good one for lesson number 13 to start off with as well. Lesson number 13 is a meaningless world engenders fear. And a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. And so, Greg Roach, I'd love for you to talk about this lesson.
Well, you know, if you trace the dominoes back, you know, a meaningless world engenders fear. What's the source of this meaninglessness? It's my own thoughts, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We come back to the realization that we do have the capacity, we do have the power to change our experience of life in the most fundamental way. And, you know, when the Course lays it out like this, you start to go, oh my God, it's just exhausting. You know, I don't mean the Course, I mean the alternative, you know, that other way of being, that sort of, you know, old or uninformed or unawakened way of being. It's just freaking exhausting. And, you know, the analogy that comes to my mind is, you know, I'm not a swimmer. When I was a kid, I almost drowned, and as a result, for my whole life, I've had water issues. I have a really deep, you know, a set of fears around water. And if I go out in the ocean, I go into deep water, I'll hit a phase where I want to struggle, and I want to exert, you know, I have to expend energy and move in order to stay up on the surface of the water. And then I'll reach this point where I realize, you know, this body knowing will take over, and it's like, no, the water will hold you up as long as you allow it to. Stop struggling and let it, you know? And that's always a beautiful point of surrender. And for me, that's analogous to the ocean of love that we are in, you know? And it's interesting how often we return to these analogies about water and fish, and you know. But when we struggle against life, and when we struggle with our thoughts, you know, and we're confronted by this perception of meaninglessness as we project that out into the world, fear is a natural consequence of that. Mm. And when we can release that struggle and just fall back into the arms of love, you're buoyed up, you're held up, and you then, you know, have so much energy that's freed up to truly perceive, to truly live.
Beautiful, thank you, baby Larsen.
Well, I know I'm so glad that, you know, fear is brought up here and highlighted, because ultimately what comes up for me is that, you know, fear needs to be your wake-up call when you're feeling fear. You know, when you're sensing that, you know, it's an opportunity to use it as a tool, profound spiritual tool, to, you know, to wake yourself up to the fact that you're somehow being invested in, you know, in the world of the mind and of the ego. And so it's just, you know, it's just because fear is, when you're invested in the world of thought and in the world of meaning making, it's going to trigger fear. So every time that fear comes up, you know, knowing that that's the source of it, and if you can allow that to be a tool to wake you up, then you can use it as a way to bring love back into your life, or the you know, the peace back into your life. So, because fear is just so deeply associated with the mind, because, you know, if you're in the woods and a bear comes to attack you, you're not, you know, there might be a real reason for fear, but for the most part, we're no longer being attacked by bears or whatever it was. We're just sitting in our chairs being attacked by bears in our mind, and therefore we're feeling false fear, so much false fear in our lives nowadays. And so if we can just allow fear to be a powerful tool to wake us up to the fact that we're in our mind and not in reality, then it can begin working for us. And of course, we don't, until we have that conscious awareness, we just live in a state of fear and allow all the havoc that wreaks to degrade our life in many, many ways. But now since we have teachings like the chorus, we can use fear as a call to action to wake up and to see that it's you know, a mechanism or a part of this false reality created by the mind.
That's so beautiful, and I want to chime in on that. Those false bears that we're creating in our mind, it has an effect on our body.
Yes.
And that effect that it has on our body, we get addicted to over time. Our body is so intelligent. It creates the receptors on the cells outside of it. Every cell in our body has receptors on the outside to communicate with everything else. Inside of our inside, to be the mind knowing what's happening in the toe, there are communication chemicals occurring from the toe all the way to the brain. It's the nervous system as well as our chemistry. And we are a society addicted to fear, and that fear has created receptors on our cells. And so when we start to wake up from the bears that are that we've created in our mind that are attacking us, our body has a memory of that. And so our body has to recreate the receptors on the outside of each of our cells to have more of the emotion, love, the emotion, that wave. And so the Course in Miracles and all of its intelligence is preparing us with these daily lessons to retrain our cells and our emotions and our biochemistry, slowly but surely, to generate those better receptors for love. And I really see those receptors when we're in love is when we're in love, more of our intelligence is available to us. And so it's like a memory of God begins waking up. as we're doing these exercises, and that memory of God, or the memory of our unity, which follows. We have that from time to time when we go into these beautiful moments, when there's all love around us. There's nothing that separates us from our loved ones that are in the room, or there's no possible fear entering our system. We have those remembrances, those timelessness of being out of duality and really being with the memory or with the mind of God, as the Course would share it. I'm so excited to dive into lesson number 14. God did not create a meaningless world. And so the idea for today is, of course, the reason why a meaningless world is impossible. What God did not create does not exist. And everything that does not exist as He created it. So the world you see has nothing to do with reality. It is of your own making, and it does not exist. And so those years before the age of reason got ingrained into our system. So the early years, that's part of my theory around this one, is God did not create a meaningless world. We get handed this meaningless world, and our ability to see it is formed before the age of reason. And those that do not dive into this meaninglessness are considered enlightened beings. Like the Dalai Lama is sought out before the age of reason, and then cultivates the space of unity within his body, within his mind, within his heart. And everywhere the Dalai Lama goes, so does this great force of crime rates dropping, of things really being at peace. People have great, profound experiences in his presence based on this, him, the Dalai Lama, knowing God. And so, Greg Roach, I'd love for you to chime in, and we've just got a few more minutes before the closing, so I'd love for you to chime in on this lesson.
Well, this is, again, the perfect ending place for this phase that we just looked at, these last 7 lessons. God did not make a meaningless world. You did. In your using your thoughts, using the power of your thoughts, you've constructed, a false reality that has nothing whatever to do with the real reality. And there's so much freedom in that, if you're willing to acknowledge it and to embrace that as an active principle in your life. There's a phenomenal amount of freedom there.
Beautiful. And Greg Larsen, I'd love for you to chime in. This is so beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with Greg that this is a great place to shift now, because we're moving into this place of, creating a reality based in the truth of God's love and based in the truth of God's creation, and giving less weight to, the meaning that our minds create based on all this past and all this lineage of thought and human just misinterpretation of reality, and moving into feeling the reality that God has created for us.
Thank you, and I'm so excited because we are going together, all 3 of us, to really go into this beautiful place called Egypt, to really ground in this knowledge, this wisdom, this true reality that's possible. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing. Greg Roach, you've gone so many times to Egypt, and I want to talk a little bit about our trip coming up that we're taking, the beautiful ones that are feeling called to come with us, to find the right-mindedness that contains the Holy Spirit, contains the voice of forgiveness and reason, wanting to go into that world. And I find Egypt a place of miracles, and to bring A Course in Miracles there. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, since you've been there so many times.
Yeah, well, Egypt is a place of miracles, and our trip last year with you, Sarah, was so amazing and so successful and so empowering and so transformational. Even before that trip was done, we knew, okay, we're coming back, and when you came forward with the realization, the insight that hey, we need to do A Course in Miracles here, the light bulb just went on for me, and so the idea of A Course in Miracles in the land of miracles, is this so perfect. So we'll be there for 2 weeks, and we'll be experiencing these incredibly powerful places of transformation. And we will be going through an outward journey as we sail the Nile, for instance, on our private boat, and we go privately into the temples and some of the other sites in Egypt. At the same time that we're going through our inward journey, into the place of miracles that lives inside of the heart. And there's something about this kind of transformational travel that is such an incredible accelerant. These experiences are just, they take personal development and our spiritual evolution to quantum exponential levels of growth, and I've seen it over and over and over again in all of the places that I'm blessed to be able to travel to, but Egypt in particular. There's no place like it on the planet. So.
I'm so excited that you'll be joining, that everyone watching has the opportunity. And so, Greg, Baby Larsen, we're going to take a group and do the undoing of the separation that we've created, and we're going to be saved from our belief in the reality that's been created here. Everyone that went with us before, and so I want to hear from you, Baby, just in this trip, what you're you're new to the Course in Miracles, you're coming into this, going with us into the land of miracles, and we're really stepping in the external world of undoing the separation that's available in Egypt, as well as we're doing the inner work of undoing of the separation. So as you're coming with us, what comes up for you?
I'm being called to serve right now to powerfully reconnect people to their hearts. It's just like, I cannot describe how passionate I am about, shedding all of these distractions that are so prevalent in today's world, and just focusing your attention on your physical heart, on your energetic heart, and as you give your attention to that space within, transformation, miraculous transformation happens, and your perception changes to really see the miracles that are all around you, and to invite those into your life, to embrace those, to live in that space of the heart, which has an intuition that is beyond space and time. And so I'm just so excited to be a part of this miraculous journey. As Greg said, traveling and spiritual travel is such an accelerant, and it's going to be just an amplification of presence and love and joy and laughter and shedding the old and what no longer serves us. And my part of this is just to really, through all the processes I'll be bringing, to really connect you to your heart in the most profound and powerful way, so you can be tuned into that intuition beyond space and time and access it to radically transform your life in a positive, powerful direction.
Awesome. And so to find more information about that, you go to spiritquesttours.com, spiritquesttours.com, and we will see you all on the next broadcast, which we cover the next lessons in the Course in Miracles. I love you. We love you. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.